dedicate this show to Barbara and Mia and Rachel, three of my favorite girls, and just want to say have a good day today, and we'll see you soon. And here we go now to Talk Saratoga.
The views expressed on the following show may not be those of the hosts, guests, or WSPN Skidmore Radio. Talk Saratoga is produced by Saratoga Broadcasting Incorporated and may not be reproduced in part or in whole unless expressed written approval is given. Now, here are the hosts of Talk Saratoga, Rick Thompson and a Saratoga All-Star.
Good morning and welcome to Talk Saratoga. And today's April 20th, which happens to be Earth Day, and also it's National Pizza Delivery Person's Day. So tip your delivery person a little extra today if you do order one for delivery. Today we have a real special guest with us, Martha Hasslacher, and her program is very special to me because, and I'll get to this again when we get to the part of the show, both my parents were in hospice, and the Gateway House of Peace is a hospice house. So I want to introduce Martha Maggie. She comes to the Gateway House of Peace with many years business and nonprofit experience. Her mom passed away peacefully at her home under hospice care, and she saw firsthand the difference hospice makes in people's lives, not just to one passing, but to the entire family, and I can attest to that myself. She began working in the nonprofit world 20 years ago, has an MBA and graduate certificate in nonprofit management, and she desires to make a difference in the lives of people by supporting the organization that serves them. She knows that whether in a for-profit or a nonprofit environment, recognizing and meeting the needs is essential to longevity and prosperity of a business. She's married, enjoys hiking with her husband, nieces, and nephews, and when she isn't working, hiking, or volunteering, she likes to bead and read, sometimes at the same time, and that I'd like to see. How you can juggle beads and read. I'll tell you, she's an amazing woman. Good morning, Maggie. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning.
It's really wonderful for you to be here today.
Well, thank you for asking.
Why don't you give us, the mission of the Gateway House?
Okay, I will. We are now in our 10th year, and it began as a vision of someone who saw the need through personal experience, like you've expressed. So that they're dedicated to providing a safe, comfortable, caring residence for terminally ill patients, and for those especially in need of a home during their last days. So Gateway House of Peace shall provide a peaceful, healing place to care for not only two terminally ill patients, but their families and friends. We're committed to providing compassionate, dignified, quality care that will support the natural processes that occur at the final days of life.
I know for the residents that it makes a really huge difference to be in a place like Gateway House. Like I had said before, both my parents were in hospice, and they do everything for the patients, everything.
They do, and it's interesting. I have heard, because I've only been there a little over a year, but I've heard a lot of stories and seen the difference that it makes for families. Recently, we had a woman come to stay with us whose daughter had been caring for her for a number of years. And it got to the point where, on her own, without support, she could no longer do it. So she described Gateway House as a bed and breakfast. So her mom came under the assumption that she would be cared for as if she were at a spa or a resort. And it made a huge difference for her being able to accept that, yes, it was the end, and yes, she wasn't at home, but she was in a home away from home.
You know, it is, because as I said, you do everything you can to make do you call residents or
We
patients?
do,
All
because
right.
they are not patients of ours. We are not a facility. Hospice is the care provider for all medical needs. We just follow their directions in order to make the last months as comfortable and pain-free as possible. And sometimes, that's a struggle for a person.
Yeah, it is very hard to accept.
It is
you're at
that.
the end of your life.
That's right. And so we have folks who are volunteers, and they come in and they listen and they talk. And hospice or our house has resources for chaplains if they're interested.
Mm-hmm.
But the residents, we call them residents or guests, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that have as much control as they're able. We let them direct the conversations, the questions, and we respond to their needs as best we're able.
Yeah, and I do have to say, I told you before, I consider hospice workers angels, because you do take such good care of the residents and the families. When you have someone in hospice and they pass away, you're still in love with the volunteers and the employees of hospice because of the treatment they
Right.
see. And it's awesome. It really is.
It's a switch for a lot of medical care providers to change their mind from getting people better to allowing them to live well
Yeah.
while they can. And so some of our staff and volunteers have been through it with family members, and they become very close. I mean, not everyone with everyone, but in some cases, we've had residents pass, and we have staff that go to the funerals or memorial services because they've become so close to the family.
Yeah. Well, my father had lived a couple of years after my mom passed away, and every other week he'd bring in a box of candy. You fall in love with the workers because it's amazing. You see a loved one and you know it's a matter of time. And I told you, excuse me, I told you in my case it was 7 months for my mom. But, so we got to be real close because, and you do things for families, like on her birthday, they had us bring a cake in, and we had a little birthday party for her, and, we talk about the residents and the care they get, but it means so much for the family.
Right.
To do normal things
Yep.
up to the end,
There was a really fabulous experience over Thanksgiving where the folks that own the Old Bryan Inn,
Yep.
they sent meals for the family of the person that was at the house, and they served 14 people. So they had this marvelous family Thanksgiving for the last time.
Yeah.
She didn't make it to Christmas.
Right.
So she was out there at the table with kids and grandkids. It was just beautiful. And that was primarily because of the support that we get from the community. I actually went in and sat with the family so that some of the staff and volunteers could be with their families.
Yeah, and that shows the bonding that goes on. Is it hard for you and the volunteers or the staff to get close to someone and then see them pass away? Or do you, and I don't mean this as a knock, do you harden yourself to the fact that this is going to happen and you give the best care you can up to the point they pass away?
I think that's a very good question, and I have seen it play out differently for different people. But what I've discovered is that it's not a hardening so much as it's a recognition. You know, when it's your loved one, this is the time. This is your one time sometimes that you're dealing with it. But our folks see it every day, all days, and they become used to the signs. And so it's not so much that they're hardened, it's just that they're accepting. They also really want to be there for that individual. Yeah. They're never alone when they die.
Yeah, we were fortunate that, you know, I live in Saratoga and my parents lived in Gloversville. And my brother lived in Broad Albin. My other brother lived in Boston. But, and, you know, you can tell, like you had just said, and we could tell my mom was going to pass away that day because she was getting very agitated and you had to increase her morphine. And you could just tell. And, but she hung on, and the volunteer, you know, the girls came in and talked to her, and we were there. I had gone home at 5 o'clock to change my clothes, and in the meantime, my brother, she was hanging on, and my brother came home from Boston. She held his hand and kissed her on the forehead, and she passed away.
Yep.
It's like she was waiting for him to get there, and then, you know, I made it down about an hour after, but
it's very interesting to see that as late as it gets, there's still a certain amount of mental control that folks show, either waiting for someone to get there or in sometimes waiting to be alone because they don't want to burden their family.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, and so we see that.
Yeah, I think when you get to that point, death is can have different effects on different people, and some people wait for someone. Some people wait for my uncle was at home, but hospice came to visit. He had hospice visit, and he wanted a priest. He couldn't get it out, and he tried making the sign of the cross. So my aunt called, and she had been a nurse. So she had called the priest that hospice had. And he came up and he said a prayer. And my uncle passed away, and he was just waiting for that priest to get there.
That's very interesting.
It is.
We are able to console the family. For instance, if you were upset that you hadn't been there, we can talk about the fact that we see folks sometimes wait and sometimes don't want anyone there because they think it might be hard to see.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in your case, you'd been with your mom the whole 7 months.
Right.
And they know that, whether or not they're verbal anymore, they know that.
Mentally.
Yeah.
They're aware. Now, do you do home visits also, or is it mainly at the house?
We are tasked with having the folks come to us.
Okay.
However, when we have a referral from hospice, we get them. Community hospice serves, I think it's 5 counties.
Wow.
So when we get a referral, in order to assess whether or not we're going to be the best fit and keep the person as safe and comfortable as possible, we often will see them in their home if they're there, or the hospital. Folks don't want to die in a hospital.
Right.
It's just not conducive to a relaxed mental state. So we do what we can to see where they are and bring them to our home if we're able.
Yeah. A friend of mine, my neighbor, was getting care at home, and his wife just couldn't handle him anymore. So she put him in hospice. Matter of fact, I think it was Gateway, but and she was so relieved that she could have somewhat of, I mean, she was there every day, but somewhat of a more normal life without worrying that he was going to fall or whatever. And it's just I can't say enough about the hospice. It's just a tremendous thing. Let's talk about your facility and what you offer. for a resident in the facility.
Okay. We have a house that is just like any other house, really. We lease it from the county for $1 a year.
Good. I was hoping you would say that.
We are community supported all the way around. And so inside we have a dining area and a kitchen, a living room that's all available for the guests, their family members, to use as if they were at home. We have 2 fully handicapped accessible bedrooms with bathrooms attached, handicap, roll the wheelchair right into the shower. But it's not set up like a hospital room. It's set up like a guest room.
Sure.
It is a hospital bed, so that if you need to have your head elevated or your feet elevated or any of those kinds of things, we're able to do that. But the setting is like a bedroom. We call one the blue room and one the green room, and they're very quiet rooms. We have good windows, but if they don't want good windows, then there's blinds, so that it's a calm environment. One has seascapes all on the walls, and another is open to the airport, so you can watch the planes landing. That's right, yep.
That's neat. I know you have fireplaces too, right?
We do. We have not used it. It at least looks nice, and we set it up with Christmas stockings and Christmas tree and all the decorations for Christmas time. It's set up for all the holidays, anybody's holiday, and the seasons, and as if you were at home decorating to make things look nice.
Sure. I hate to keep referring to my parents, but when my mom first went in, she just needed a lot of oxygen, and they wouldn't let her stay home. But she loved her laptop, and you have such great, comfortable chairs also in the rooms, but she could go on the nightstand next to her, get in a chair, and play a game on a computer. And that, of course, made her feel good. And then it got to a point where you can't do that. But that was so neat that she was able to do that,
Right. We have, Wi-Fi for the house. There's a TV with Netflix and Roku. And we're not far from an ice cream place, and so sometimes folks will bring in ice cream. Sometimes, depending on how well they're doing, they might take a little car ride and go get an ice cream.
Yeah.
They can sit out on the back patio, and it's a broad field behind us, so you get to watch the birds and sometimes other animals.
Sure. Yeah, that's neat. Let's talk a little bit about the criteria for admission, because I know there has to be you can't live in Gateway House for a year.
Right.
So what's the criteria for someone to have the hospice?
That is a question we get fairly regularly. As I said, we get the referrals from all of the hospice social workers and the nurses. We also can get a referral from anyone. You can call up and say, hey, I have someone who I think needs this help. We have only hospice residents. So if you're not on hospice, you'd have to be on hospice. Hospice takes folks who are essentially 6 months or less to live. We concentrate on the last 3 months.
Okay.
And we are staffed. We do have 24-hour staff, but they only work one at a time. If we have volunteers, they come in to supplement, but they're not generally there in the middle of the night, whereas we have one staff person, and I say that because we need to be able to care for the person, turn the person, help them, assist them to the commode if they need that. So generally, and this is not hard and fast, but generally the people are 150 pounds or less.
Okay.
For safety reasons. I can't
Sure.
take someone who's in 300 pounds because I don't have the ability to care for them.
Right.
So that's one guideline, let's say. And then, so we've started the 3 months or less. They have to be on hospice. They have to be around 150 pounds. And their diagnosis really needs to correspond with that 3 months or less. It's hard to say to someone, well, how soon are you going to die? So we don't say that in, express words.
Yeah.
That's right. But we determine with their medical professionals and their family whether or not they would be a good fit. And then because we're supported by the community, we would look for folks who have no other options. If they don't have family or friends or finance, if they're not in a safe environment, they would be the first choices. We don't have a wait list in the sense that you're on it and then the next person has to wait for you. We assess every day, all the time, who's the best fit and who needs us the most, who has the greatest need.
Sure. And you can accommodate up to how many?
We have 2 resident beds,
Okay.
so just 2 at a time.
All right.
And when we get a call and someone says, well, do you have a bed today? My answer is no, if I don't. But I ask for the referral unless it's an immediate need,
Sure.
so that we can determine in a day or 2 or a week if we get a bed,
Right.
so that we know ahead of time there's somebody who needs us.
Yeah, the prognosis is probably the important.
Yep.
factor.
And it changes. I mean, I have 2 people now. I may not have 2 people next week.
Right. And then you may have one person from the 2 that lasts for a long time.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
my mother was a stubborn Italian, and they didn't expect her to go 7 months, but she did.
Right.
And, and when and that's tough when you only have 2 at a time.
It is, because our hope is to help as many people as we can, obviously. Sure. Looking at someone like your mom, if someone gets to 3 months and they're clearly either getting better, because that happens, or they're not ready to go, then we might talk about other circumstances. If they're not, if they're still in that same, they're going downhill fast and no one else has a place to care for them, then they'll stay.
Yeah.
So we've had folks on occasion who stay longer. And sometimes they get to us too late, and they're only there for a day. And yes, they're comfortable, they're safe, and sometimes maybe that's all they were waiting for.
Yeah.
But I'd love for somebody to have a little bit more time.
Yeah, well, I think that's normal,
Right.
Especially for you. I
Yep.
mean, it's like we said before, facing the end of your life, especially if you still have the capability to reason, is a very, very difficult thing. And I'm sure you want someone to be more comfortable at hospice than maybe struggling at home. And
Right.
that's pretty neat. I tell you. Now you get referrals from Saratoga County residents?
We get referrals from all over.
Oh, you do?
We do. And so we're not exclusively serving Saratoga residents. We'll get folks from Albany or Schenectady or Amsterdam, depending on their need.
Mm-hmm.
But if we had to make a determination between 2 equally good candidates, and one was from Saratoga, we would give them the preference.
Sure.
Because this is where our home is.
Right.
There are only about 4 homes with 2 beds that do this in the surrounding 4 counties. Hospice itself has a facility in Albany, but it's in a hospital, so it's not quite the same.
No, it isn't.
And so if there's only 8 beds in 5 counties, there's a great need.
Oh, sure. Well, we were fortunate. The one in Gloversville, I forget how many beds they have, but it's quite a few.
Mm-hmm.
And but that means more staffing and more volunteers. I know that they have good volunteer down there, and I'm sure I'm sure in this area you probably have good volunteers, which we'll talk about the volunteering after, because there's so many different needs of hospice home that you need, that you need plenty of volunteers. Now, my mother or father did not have a DNR. Is that pretty standard in hospice care?
Well, hospice does not require that, but our comfort care home does. So we are not going to resuscitate or intubate someone. Our goal is to let them live with the least amount of intrusion.
Mm-hmm.
So all of our residents have a DNR and a DNI in place when they come to us. Whether they do that while they're, when they first are arriving, or they already have one.
Okay, and that's do not resuscitate.
Yes.
For those of you in Rio Lindo that don't know what DNR is, that's, I can see, because you'd probably have to have professionals on staff to do that.
Yep.
And it's, I can't imagine someone at that point going on.
It would be
much
very
longer.
traumatic for the family, especially. We had a resident come to us. She'd been home with her husband and had a heart attack and ended up in the hospital. And it was a matter of time that they were told it's going to happen again. And her husband was not mentally able to be the person to say, okay, we can't do anything more. He was just too worried about what would happen if the next time she had this massive heart attack and he was the only one there.
Right.
He didn't want to have to make that decision to let her go.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's, like we said, it's a very hard and very difficult time of a person's life. And I think the family doesn't know what to do, because, there's a lot of decisions. So I think eliminating some of the processes. My mother-in-law had Alzheimer's and didn't want a DNR, and she went on and on, to the end. But that's the process,
right,
of certain things,
And so we help by having those discussions right when they arrive with us.
Right.
But I would suggest that a gift that a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old can give to their family is to have those discussions. If you're 60 and you haven't talked about that with your family, what are your wishes? Where's your will? That's a big gift if you get that done when it's not an emergency situation,
Right.
It's not crisis. Now we can do it with cooler heads and have the comfort of knowing ahead of time that we've had this discussion.
Sure. Oh, yeah, you should be prepared, not only for the resident, but for Gateway. You should have everything lined up.
Yep.
And like you said, it could happen the next day. It could happen in
Right.
2 weeks.
So, we ask the questions of do you have a funeral home picked out? Do you have, does your family know whether you want a church or a no service or,
or a
outside?
service at the cemetery.
That's
or
right,
whatever,
exactly. How much easier it would have been if they're not coming into the hospice house,
Yeah.
for the first time, to have that question asked.
Oh, exactly. And that makes the anxiety compounded.
Right.
And I think, and you know what? I think humans don't do that more than they do that, because they don't want, they think by not doing it, they're pushing their time out.
Right.
If you're 60 years old, you don't want to think about that.
Yep.
Where you should have your will done,
Yep.
and have all these medical things lined up so that the surviving spouse or partner And the Gateway House, as an example, has everything lined up because it's very hard to do it after they pass.
That's right.
You know,
Yep.
but oh well, it's now. We established you're not a medical facility, and you know, the care is provided as if their own family would provide for a loved one. And I mean, that example of not being able to care for a spouse and make that call at the time, and that takes a lot of peace off of both. How it began. Let's talk about how Gateway started. We talked a little bit about that, but you know, we didn't have a Gateway House for how long have you been?
We're here 10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
And 10 years before, there wasn't a facility like Gateway House in Saratoga, of all places.
Right. And the founder, Joni Hanchett, had seen this type of care in Western New York and determined that this was something she wanted to see happen here in Saratoga County. I am on the board, or in a group of other comfort care providers, and there are many more in the central New York around Strong Memorial and all of those health facilities there. But here we have a high population. We're not New York City, but there's still a high population. And if folks are rural, for instance, they have less access to assistance. And so I think that the pointing out that Saratoga was a great location was probably inspired. And we have anywhere from 6 or more referrals waiting at any given day. So it shows a great need.
Oh, definitely. And, I hope at some point you can expand.
Well, that's interesting because when I started talking, most people assume that a comfort care home is only 2 beds. But you've mentioned the one in Gloversville. There's one in Utica that has 6. The biggest difference between a comfort care home and a facility is the fact that we are not a medical facility.
Correct.
We are always under the auspices of hospice. They provide all the medical direction, and we just follow that as if you were at home. If I had 6 beds, yes, I probably could have enough referrals to fit that. It would be quite a job getting the volunteers and the staff to man it, but I can see that there's a need out there.
Yeah.
So
I think no matter what the size of the area, there's always a need, and there's always a need probably for more space. I mean, it's tough.
We have 2 respite rooms that are not for the guests. They're for family members who have traveled to visit, or if it's getting close. We have those 2 bedrooms that are upstairs, so obviously not handicapped accessible, that folks can stay in. And I just don't see a way for us to expand our house in such a way that we'd be able to take another resident.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place, but I think it was a Red Cross
that's
office
right.
before, but I don't see how you could add on in a way that wouldn't be extravagantly expensive.
Right, right.
I mean, the property's beautiful. You probably have the property, but unless somebody wanted to endow you with a couple $1 million, I don't see how you could do it. But
I don't either. There is a home in Glenville that was purpose-built.
Okay.
And so they have the funding that built their house. And They have a lot of lovely spaces, but they still are 2 rooms. They're in a community that's just homes, like we are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, I want to get a little bit about you and how you got involved in hospice. I mean, what was the connection between you and getting here in Saratoga hospice?
I have, as you mentioned, I've worked in nonprofits. I almost stumbled upon this offering they were looking for a executive director. I'm really their first full-time executive director. They have had
Really?
a couple of people who've done some part-time work after the founder, but I'm the first person that's sort of fit in this role. It was a big leap for the board to say, all right, we're going to pay someone full-time. And for me, you mentioned the difference that hospice made for your family. And I had seen that real important work that gets done. It's not an easy topic. People don't want to talk about life and death and dying. It's much easier to talk about helping kids or puppies.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But I'm not put off by these conversations. I'm happy to listen to folks and to walk alongside them. And so I really felt that it was a good place for me to be. I like working with the staff and the volunteers and assisting them through their personal trials and their growth in becoming the best at what they're doing. We're a nonprofit that is very underfunded in terms of I can't extravagantly pay the staff.
Right.
And so they need to know that what they're doing is making a difference in people's lives, and they're getting more than just their paycheck. They're getting that intrinsic value. So I get to tell them about that.
Well, as I said before, and rightly so, you're looked upon as angels. And I think if they're told that by families, that means more to them probably than knowing they're volunteers than, getting paid to be strapped to the organization that they can't do certain things.
Right. I think that's especially for the folks that it sinks in. We have some staff that volunteer to make beautiful life quilts for the family members, and we have other staff that come in with, on their time off to do something special. And if they're not there in an hour when the family is there, they wouldn't know what a difference it makes.
Sure.
So we like to share that across the schedule.
Now, I've had other nonprofits on the show. We like to highlight nonprofits because, if it wasn't for nonprofits, we would be a sad society, because there's people that in nonprofits that have volunteers behind the scene that do the bulk of the work, taking nothing away from the director, but you have so much work to do that you wouldn't be able to do everything if it wasn't,
Right.
But the one question I always ask them is, do you get grants?
And you know what? It's something that nonprofits are always looking for, and there are some out there, depending on the type of work that the nonprofit does. There are more or less. There are definitely more that want to help, kids.
Yeah.
and
I know.
It's so this is an interesting sector. In Saratoga, we've coined a phrase called the impact sector. Going back to what you said, nonprofits are the ones that are making things happen. They're getting things done. And in a lot of regards, grants are looking at a thing they want to fund.
Right.
A hardscape, they want to name a new building, or they want to fund a new program that is finite.
Yep.
And our work at Gateway House is not finite, and it's not easily determined. It's not a new, reading program at the library for kids. Our staff are the program staff. They're the costs, because without them, it doesn't happen. And the other thing is, we have, upwards of 100 people that we serve.
Sure.
That's not a big number if you're looking for, a return on dollars.
Or recognition
Right.
for the donor. Well, the only reason I asked that was because along with your other duties, that's probably one of your main things, is to look for money.
Yep.
To come in, and that's, I'm glad to see you're a full-time executive, because as a volunteer, that would be almost too much to run the place and to have to do that side work too.
Yeah.
That's, like you said, I think here again with hospice, I don't think people want to think about that, especially big donors. Like you said, they want, and nothing, personally, I go by, I mentioned this last week to one of the people that were on, the director of a nonprofit, George Steinbrenner, who was owner of the Yankees, his father, they were big shipping. That's where they got their money. And he told him, he said, if you ever donate money or do anything good for people, don't associate your name with it. Do it for the privilege of making it better. And that's how I feel about a lot of big donors. Do it anonymously. I think you get more of a benefit and self-satisfaction, I would anyway, than seeing your name plastered above a doorway.
Right.
But like you said, you'll help kids programs and other things, but hospice is something that no one wants to put in their mind.
Right. And I help kids too. I make donations to kids programs myself.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's just easier to think about making a difference that will have longevity, right? Whereas what we're talking about is something that's short term.
Yeah.
Our effectiveness is by design for a short amount of time.
But it's what you do.
Right.
That's how I feel. Yeah, it's short time, but you're doing it all the time, and it's the service that you're providing is almost better than anything else. It's just, when they say, well, we want to help as many people as we can.
Right.
Well, you are. You're helping families. You're helping the residents.
Right. And the community.
Yeah.
We got a referral once from hospice, and they said they had a patient who was essentially homeless and living on, the benefits of friends' couches. But hospice's concern was that they didn't know what was happening to their drugs. They didn't think they were getting the prescribed medications, and so they were in more pain and much less comfortable. And they asked if we could take that person in, and we were able to.
Oh, that's nice.
To the extent that hospice had to come back and adjust the medications, because true enough, they hadn't been getting them. So not only do we help hospice in that regard, we help that family do right by the person, but we help the community because, of course, who wants all those drugs running around?
Well, that's the problem, and I not to get on homelessness, but there's a large percentage of homeless people that it's because of drugs and because of alcohol and mental illness. I don't think anybody chooses to be homeless. In some cases, it happens. I mean,
Right. It does.
I always say, for the grace of God, you or I could be in
Easily,
the shape
that's right.
to be homeless today.
And so then compound that with dying. And, we had a call from one of the Ys, and they had someone who was dying of cancer in a Y bed, and your heart breaks to think of that. You're alone, you don't have anything, and you've got no one to care for you.
Yeah.
And that is really the epitome of our mission, is we look for ways that we can step in and be that family.
Sure, that's the total opposite of that way of thinking.
Right.
Now, you accept people of all races, colors, creeds, religious beliefs.
That's right. We are not a religious organization. As I said earlier, we let the residents direct whatever those conversations are.
Sure.
Primarily, I'll say that we have more women than men, and that, I think, is a function of men generally have a woman around, their spouse or a loved one or a child, who will care for them, whereas the women may have outlived or, not had those resources.
Yeah.
But we also get a fair number of veterans, and for whatever reason, they find themselves without the support necessary while they're dying.
Yeah, that's too bad. And with veterans, I don't think they get the support in life. I mean, I think, here again, you don't want to generalize, but when you fight in a war as a kid, that's so traumatic, and you carry so much baggage around that I think, that doesn't help either as they get older. But you had said something about there's more women in hospice care than men, and I would have thought it'd be the other way around, because usually women outlive men. I think the life average is higher for women. So I would have thought.
It is, and but it's this narrow space where they need a home.
Okay.
It's not that they are more likely to be dying. It's that they're more likely to need someone to care for them.
Okay.
The men generally, we find, have other family resources, or often, financial resources.
Yeah.
We take care of folks as young. The first one, I think, was 35. And she was dying of multiple cancers. And there's a story, I think, on the website of her being a big Friends fan, and the one of our volunteers, one of our board members, was a brother-in-law to the producer of Friends.
Really?
And her family thought, this volunteer, her family thought that she was kind of crazy. Oh, it's just one of those things she does. Until they came to the house and they saw the work that takes place, and that particular individual is a big donor now because he sees the real difference it makes.
That's neat. Hey, we have about 9 minutes left, so I want to get into some things that people may not know about. The Gateway House has a thrift shop located on Geyser Road, and you don't take clothes.
Correct.
But you do take household items, jewelry, home decorations, toys, furniture, upholstered furniture, lamps, kitchenware, antiques, collectibles, pictures, and things of that nature. And that's to make money to help the... Right.
Everything that the thrift shop brings in supports the work that takes place at Gateway House. It is entirely funded by, these donations. It is entirely staffed by volunteers, and their resources then are part of the budget for Gateway House of Peace, and it makes a big difference in our ability to do what we do.
Yeah, I'm glad you have that because
Yep.
it's
And, it's a nice gift to the community because they get things at a very reasonable price that would otherwise, end up in the landfill? I don't know. I mean,
no, I know, or being thrown out
Right.
or whatever. Yeah, it's a great shop too.
it's dangerous to go in there because there's lots of fun things.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Thrift shops are great places to go to buy nice things because, like you said, people are donating them, and they're usually not throwaway things,
Right.
I want to talk a little bit about the need in the different areas that the volunteers could sign up for.
Yes. It's a hard conversation to have with someone if they think the only thing they could do is care for, bedside personal care, and they're just not, for whatever reason, physically or mentally able to do that. But our house is a house like any other. And if you think about having upwards of 20 people a day in your house, you have to recognize that there are meals and cleaning and supplies and all of those opportunities to make the house a home. And there are ways to just sit with someone and talk or listen or read, play cards or Scrabble. Those are all opportunities to volunteer.
There's, I see gardening down here, and that's always nice. Do you ever rely on, like, the high school kids that need to do some volunteer work as part of their program to graduate? Do you ever utilize them?
Yes. We have both high school students who are looking for their extracurricular qualifications, and we also have college students who come in for their experiential training credits. And we can take them for a day-long project, like you said, gardening, or, they help with the tent sale, the garage sale, or they're a nursing student or a sociology student and they want those experience hours.
You ever utilize Skidmore students?
We have some, yes.
'Cause
There's a program
giving,
out of Union that is Skidmore, Union, and another college. I'm not sure which one they're affiliated, maybe Adirondack Community.
Okay.
And they have, we get care fellows. Those are students who have a summer program, and they get paid for their work through their program, and they come to places like us for that extra work.
All right. I don't want to get cut off here because Homer will be coming in to get set up, and that's not a problem. We can keep going for a few minutes, but some of the events that you have coming up.
So those are things that we do to fund and to raise awareness. So on the website, you'll see some. I have some invitations here for the gala, which is our biggest fundraiser. That's in May. But we also have Mother's Day flowers that we'll be selling the 10th and 11th, I think it is. Mm-hmm. And we also have that tent sale I was talking about, which is just a big extravaganza of a yard sale. Those are ways that we get to talk to the public, and we raise funds to support the budget.
Neat. Now, this May 17th event that you have, the butterfly ball, it's from 6 to 10, and it's at the barn at Twin Leaf Farms.
That's
on
right.
High Spot Road in Greenfield Center. And you even have music.
We do. Funk Evolution is going to do the music.
Evolution.
That's right.
That's interesting. I don't know what kind of music they play, but...
Well, as the name suggests,
Okay.
It's a bit of funk.
Funk.
There's a saxophone there, so that makes me very happy.
Yeah, neat. That's great. Food and drinks provided by an Ovo Kitchen.
Yep.
And you can dress up
Yes, it is. It is definitely a place where if you want to put on sparkly clothes, you can. It's not required. Folks come in business casual or casual. It's not stuffy. It's not sit down. It's just a really fun time. There's not a lot of speeches going on. It's not boring. There's an opportunity to buy a raffle ticket. A 1 in 250 chance for $10,000 is pretty good.
Wow, I guess so.
There's a silent auction going on where communities, businesses have made donations, so there's a very wide variety of things.
Neat. How much are the tickets for the raffle?
The raffle tickets are $100.
Okay.
And the gala tickets are $125.
Okay. And they can get the tickets by calling hospice or sending a check?
They can send a check. If they go to gatewayhouseofpeace.org on the web,
right,
they'll see all of that. In fact, it's a pop-up now.
Okay. So. Oh, great. Okay, good. And that's gatewayhouseofpeace.org.
Correct.
You can email Maggie at info@gatewayhouseofpeace.org.
Right.
And they're located on 479 Roland Street in Ballston Spa, which is, I always consider that Saratoga, but it's right on the main Roland there. It's on the right-hand side just before you get to the airport. So you can't miss it. If you get to the airport, you've gone too far, so turn around and go back. And again, Maggie's the executive director. And, thanks for being here today. Maggie, I appreciate it, and I'd like to have you back again maybe in the fall or sometime, to go over things again, because it's a great program, and people should hear about it.
Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it, and I'd love to. Especially maybe I can talk more about volunteer opportunities.
We'll do that. Okay?
All right.
You have a great weekend, okay?
Thank you. You too.
All right. And Earth Day, plant a tree or play in the dirt. So
I'm going to plant some flowers.
All right. Way to go.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.